It was just another normal day until one call turned everything upside down. A routine traffic stop escalated quickly, and in a split second, an innocent woman found herself handcuffed and sitting in the back of a patrol car. The officers were sure they had the right person, but they couldn't have been more wrong. This woman wasn't just anyone. She was someone with connections that no one, not even the police, could have anticipated. As the tension rose, this wasn't going to be your average case. With every passing minute, the officers became more convinced they were dealing with a criminal mastermind, but something didn't feel right. In a world full of misunderstandings and mistakes, she knew that one call could turn the entire situation around. But this wasn't just any call, it was to the Pentagon. What happened next shocked everyone involved. Who was this woman, and why did she have the power to bring the entire situation to a screeching halt? As the officers scrambled for answers, the clock was ticking, and they were about to learn just how big of a mistake they had made. Stay tuned to find out what happens when a simple phone call changes everything. As the officers waited for backup, the woman sat in the back of the patrol car, her face a mix of frustration and calm determination. They couldn't understand why she wasn't panicking. She knew she had been wrongly arrested, but what they didn't realize was that this wasn't the first time she had dealt with situations far more complicated than this. The woman, whose name was Sarah, had spent years working in a field few people even knew existed. Her connections ran deep, reaching places most wouldn't even dream of, and she'd learned one crucial lesson: never underestimate the power of the right phone call. Sarah wasn't just any ordinary woman. She had once worked as a consultant for the Department of Defense, handling sensitive information and projects that could change the course of history. Her expertise in security had put her in the inner circles of some of the most powerful people in the country. Now, a simple misunderstanding had put her in a position where she had to use those connections to her advantage. The officers, still unaware of her past, were busy questioning her. They assumed they were dealing with a woman with a fake identity, but Sarah knew that if they didn't believe her story soon, this could escalate into something much worse. She calmly reached for her phone, dialing a one number that could end this nightmare. But would it be enough to save her, or had they already gone too far? As Sarah's phone rang, the quiet hum of the patrol car seemed to grow louder. The officer sitting in the front seat glanced over his shoulder, eyes narrowing at the calmness she exuded. He couldn't quite shake the feeling that something was off. This wasn't just another routine arrest. There was something about her demeanor, the way she sat, almost unbothered, despite being handcuffed, that didn't add up. Sarah's hand trembled ever so slightly, but it wasn't from fear. It was from the weight of the call she was about to make. She knew that once she hit send, there was no turning back. The officer's partner, a younger cop named Ryan, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He had been in law enforcement long enough to recognize when someone was hiding something. His gut told him Sarah wasn't just a random woman caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. He had seen criminals before, but she didn't fit the profile. Still, his training told him to follow procedure. "Just hold tight, ma'am. We'll sort this out," he said, trying to reassure her, though he wasn't sure who he was trying to comfort more, her or himself. Sarah's phone finally connected, and she took a deep breath, her fingers pressing against the cold screen. The voice on the other end was familiar. It was exactly who she needed right now. Her heart raced as the words tumbled out, knowing this was the moment she'd been dreading for years. "I need help. It's urgent." Meanwhile, back at the police station, a different kind of tension was building. Officer Harris, who had been overseeing the arrest, was growing more and more frustrated with the lack of progress. He couldn't understand why they hadn't already processed Sarah. He knew the arrest had been a mistake, but now something felt off, like this small error was snowballing into something much larger. He had no idea how deep Sarah's involvement really went, or how much her past would soon come crashing into the present. On the other side of the call, someone was listening. Sarah's name wasn't just known within the Pentagon. It was known across some of the most powerful circles in the country. The moment she called, someone within the defense network started moving, quietly, efficiently. There were questions. There was confusion. But one thing was certain. The situation was about to spiral far beyond the local police station. As Sarah ended the call, she looked out the window, her eyes scanning the street. She could feel the eyes of the officers on her. But the real danger wasn't from them. It was from what was coming next. They had no idea what they were dealing with, but soon they would. The tension inside the patrol car thickened as Sarah sat in silence. The officers, now acutely aware that something wasn't right, exchanged uneasy glances. Ryan kept his gaze fixed on the road ahead, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling in his gut. Officer Harris was pacing back and forth in the station, making calls to the precinct. The arrest should have been straightforward, but everything about this case felt wrong. The woman they had in custody wasn't just another suspect. She was a puzzle, one that didn't seem to fit the pieces they had. Outside, the hum of city life continued, oblivious to the storm that was brewing just around the corner. Sarah's mind raced. Her call had been answered, but nothing was guaranteed. She could feel her pulse quicken as the weight of the situation sank in. The officers didn't know who they were really dealing with, but they were about to find out. The call to the Pentagon wasn't just a safety net. It was a signal that the game had changed. Back at the station, Officer Harris was growing more anxious by the second. The call he'd made to higher-ups had been cryptic, but the response had been clear. Get her out of custody now. There was something bigger at play, but what? He had no idea that Sarah's involvement was about to trigger a ripple effect that would shake the very foundation of what they knew about their own department. Suddenly, the door to the holding room opened. Officer Harris walked in, his eyes focused on Sarah. She looked up, her expression steady. Her calmness only added to the unease he felt. "We're going to have to sort this out, miss," he said, trying to maintain authority, but there was doubt in his voice now. The room was tense, but Sarah knew time was running out. The phone call had set things into motion, and from the other side of the line, the wheels were already turning. Within minutes, people in positions of power were being contacted, pulling strings and making moves that would send shockwaves throughout the system. The officers had no idea, but Sarah wasn't just a woman being wrongly arrested. She was a key player in a much larger game, and the clock was ticking. As Harris stepped closer, Sarah's phone buzzed again, vibrating against her wrist. This time, it wasn't the Pentagon. It was someone even more unexpected. The message on the screen sent a chill down her spine. Asterisk, "They know you're here," asterisk. She looked up, her gaze meeting Harris. He didn't know it yet, but this wasn't just about a wrongful arrest. It was about survival. Everything was about to change. Sarah's heart skipped a beat as she read the message. Asterisk, "They know you're here," asterisk. Her pulse raced, the gravity of the situation sinking in. She wasn't just dealing with a simple mistake anymore. Whoever they were, they had eyes everywhere, and this arrest was a piece of a much larger puzzle she wasn't prepared to face. Her mind flashed back to the years she'd spent working under the radar, handling sensitive operations, brushing elbows with people who didn't hesitate to pull strings when needed. But now it felt like she was the one being played. The door slammed open with a jarring noise, and Officer Harris stepped back in, his face grim. "We're getting instructions from above," he said, his voice tight, betraying his nerves. Sarah could tell something had shifted, but she wasn't sure if it was for better or worse. Her instincts screamed that this was no longer just a mix-up. Something far bigger was in motion, and she had no idea who was pulling the strings. Meanwhile, outside the station, the world remained unaware of the storm about to hit. A black SUV rolled up to the curb, its tinted windows reflecting the fading sunlight. The men inside were the kind of people who didn't leave things to chance. Their mission was simple: find Sarah and silence whatever she knew. They weren't here for the usual paperwork. They weren't here for a small mistake. They were here to finish what had already been set in motion, and no one in that police station knew it yet. Inside, Sarah's phone buzzed again, more urgent this time. She unlocked it quickly, half expecting another chilling message. But this one was different. A name flashed across the screen, and her breath caught. It was someone from her past, someone she hadn't heard from in years. They were reaching out with a warning, but she didn't have time to process the message before a sharp knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Officer Harris' voice broke through the tension. "Miss, we need to move you. You're being transferred to another facility." Transferred? Sarah's mind raced. She hadn't expected this. It wasn't just an arrest anymore. It was a covert operation. She couldn't let herself be moved, not without knowing who else was involved. She had been targeted, but the question remained, why? Just as she stood up, ready to push back, the sound of footsteps echoed in the hall. Someone new had arrived, a person she recognized from the shadows of her past. The tension in the air shifted. This wasn't just about the Pentagon or a wrongful arrest anymore. This was personal. The officer beside her stiffened, eyes widening in recognition. "We've got trouble," he muttered under his breath, his voice barely audible. But it was enough. Sarah knew, without a doubt, that the game had just changed again, and she had no idea how deep the rabbit hole really went. The door creaked open again, and this time it wasn't an officer. Sarah's heart lurched as she saw the figure standing in the doorway. He was tall, sharply dressed, and his presence alone made the room feel smaller. She knew exactly who he was. Victor Cruz, a name she had hoped to never hear again. He was part of the same world she'd once navigated, a world of high-stakes operations, where the rules were flexible and loyalty meant nothing when power was on the line. Victor's eyes met hers, cold and calculating. "Sarah," he said, his voice smooth but carrying an edge. "We need to talk." Sarah stood frozen, the weight of her past crashing over her in waves. How had he found her? She knew that if Cruz was here, it wasn't just a simple arrest. This was something far more dangerous, something connected to her time working with the Pentagon. She was no longer just a consultant, she was a target. And the people after her weren't just random criminals. They were powerful, pulling strings from every direction. Officer Harris stepped back, confused by the sudden shift in the room. Ryan, too, exchanged uneasy glances with his partner. They had no idea what was happening, but they could feel the tension building. Sarah's mind raced, searching for an escape. But the door was closed, the room locked down, and Victor was standing in front of her like a wall she couldn't break through. "Do you really think you can hide from us forever?" Victor asked, his voice dripping with venom. "You've made mistakes, Sarah, big ones, and now it's time to clean up your mess." Sarah's pulse quickened, but her voice remained steady. "I didn't make any mistakes. You've been playing a dangerous game, and now you're about to lose." She was bluffing, but she hoped it would buy her time. She glanced at the officers. They didn't understand the full scope of the situation, but Sarah knew they were in over their heads. Victor wasn't just some shadowy figure. He was a ghost from her past, someone who knew everything about her, and now he was holding the cards. Before Victor could respond, a voice rang out from behind him. "Step away from her." The officers turned, startled. A third figure appeared in the doorway, this one more familiar to Sarah. It was Agent Daniels, a high-ranking official from the Pentagon who had once worked alongside her. The air shifted once again, this time with an even greater sense of urgency. Agent Daniels stepped forward, his eyes locking with Sarah's, as if reassuring her that things were under control, at least for now. Victor's face twisted with rage. "You brought him here. After everything, Sarah. You think you're getting away with this?" His voice trembled with fury, and for a brief moment, it looked like he might snap. Agent Daniels didn't flinch. "This is over, Cruz. You're done." But just as Sarah thought the situation might be finally resolved, a chilling sound interrupted the tension, the unmistakable hum of a helicopter overhead. The walls seemed to vibrate with its presence. Everyone in the room froze. Then, as if on cue, the door burst open once again, and another man stepped in. But this time, he was wearing a military uniform, his eyes sharp and calculating. He didn't speak immediately, just scanned the room, his gaze settling on Sarah. "Is she secure?" he asked, his tone flat. She's ours, Victor spat, still seething, but the man in uniform wasn't looking at him. His eyes were locked on Sarah, who now understood the final twist of the situation. She's ours, he repeated, his voice low and commanding. You all need to leave. Now.